any organization in India, and the challenge for us certainly at Daily Hunt is how do you make products for every person which is very personalized, but at the same time make that product for 1 billion Indians, right? So when you think about this, it's which are the concepts that you need to focus on to make sure that your product is both personalized and scalable. And the theme of this event is about personalization and performance and purpose, and I've tried to model the discussion around that. When it really comes down to the basics, it's about what is the philosophy that you're employing for creating your product. And we all hear several times about, there's AI, there's ML, there's digitization, there's so on and so forth. For a lot of us, these are buzzwords. But when you get down to the basics of it, it's really the concepts that need to be strong. Everything else is technology that enables that concept. I think that's the point I wanted to make during this session, and I'll talk about just 3 concepts because I have about 15 minutes, spend 5 minutes per concept. When you look at the first philosophy, why is hyper-local so important? It's the theory of concentric circles. This theory started long back in the 1920s actually, and it was more around urban planning. How do you plan for growth of a city? And the concept was that everything that is local, everything that is around you is most important for you, right? A human being, and all of us certainly, plus the people in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 India, spend most of their time within a few miles radius of their home or work. Then why is it so important to feed them information about their state, the country, the world, and so on and so forth, right? Now, some of it, of course, is for informational purposes, but what drives utility of that information is what is in and around that person, what is hyper-local. And that has been the focus for us at Daily Hunt as we create our products, is everything hyper-local should take precedence over the expanding circles beyond that person. If you look at consumption of content, and we aggregate content across so many sources, more than 50% of the consumption happens for hyper-local content. I was reading this, this meme came across the other day, which said that I really, really like you, but I'm not crossing Worli to come and meet you, right? So if we can't do that in our own, in large cities where there's enough connectivity and people can travel, you can think about when you move further out of the cities into tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 markets, people spend all their time around their home or their workplaces. So that is the most important, that is their world for them. And then it's the city, state, country, and then the world. So we are trying our best to make everything around this theory of concentric circles. Daily Hunt is getting more and more hyper-local as time goes by. In fact, the product, and that's what I wanted to talk about, how are we defining the product? It's going to talk about your local weather. That's more important to you to plan your day than maybe some hurricanes that are happening in Florida. Petrol, diesel prices in and around you, local merchants, local news, and local events. This will basically define how we can personalize the product for every user. And the minute you start doing that for one town, one city, and expand it to all the districts and all the small towns in India, that's when you do personalization at scale. So I wanted to just leave the first concept with you is around the theory of concentric circles, is make the product very personalized to the person who is staying in a particular locality, and then take that same concept and scale it across the entire country. So that's the challenge we have at hand. And what it means for marketers, what it means for advertisers is, so what? I mean, if a person is staying in and around their places, what does it mean for me? What it means for you is, if your communication is more local, if your communication is in the language of the person staying in that locality, if the communication gives them information about your store in that locality, it has a much, much higher success rate than just a generic brand communication. So while we define the product, the content, and the delivery, we are also very focused on making sure that it should make sense for marketers. And we have one of the most leading technologies in the country of pin code targeting, which basically means that you can send information and offers to everyone on the app in the pin code of their residence, right? That's as hyper-local advertising as you could get. The second concept that I wanted to talk about is the mother tongue theory, right? Now, I know everybody in this room, barring none, would have a business communication language, which could be English or Hindi, but at the end of the day, when you go back home, you switch back to the mother tongue. Now, why does that happen? There's a concept called neuro-linguistic programming. And what neuro-linguistic programming basically says is that your brain is wired in a way to think right from your childhood, right? We don't change much as we may like to think. Few changes, yes, come around because of experience, education, the environment around us. But the way we think about things pretty much stays the same. And the language that we think in stays the same through most of your life, or maybe all your life, right? And that is the mother tongue that you've grown up talking to at your home, with your friends, with your family. And again, extending it out into tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 India, they are not as exposed to English, they are not as exposed to Hindi, but they are spending all their time talking in their mother tongue. So mother tongue becomes a very, very effective way of us trying to build a product for 1 billion Indians. Because if we just try to do it in English, at best you could reach maybe about 150 or 200 million Indians. But how do you reach 1 billion? Is that you start talking in everyone's local and regional language. In fact, one of the surprising things that came about, and again we hear this, that there's more English medium schools, people are reading more in English, so on and so forth. The point is that over 60% of users in the 18 to 24, which is what we call as millennials, read the Daily Hunt app in their local language. So people still continue to choose their mother tongue and their regional language over the medium of instructions in the schools or colleges. And that's what leads to hardwiring in the brain. That's what leads to how you think. In fact, I was a software engineer several years ago, and when I went to Bangalore and started interacting with people from different parts of the country, and I used to speak in English because that's what I've been trained in and educated in, the response always used to be delayed by maybe a couple of milliseconds or a couple of seconds. And when I asked them why, they said, I think in Telugu or Tamil or Kannada, and then I translate that back to talk to you in English, right? So the thinking continues to happen in the local language. So what has happened in the digital world, fortunately or unfortunately, is that it's always been an English medium, right? It never started off as local print or local radio or local TV where you had channels in different languages. It always started off as English. But the good part of that is now that English is tapped out, you have everyone who could speak English is maybe already on the internet. How do you get the next 700-800 million people on the internet? Is you talk to them in their local language. Nelson Mandela made a very important quote, and he says that if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. But if you talk to him in his own native language, that goes to his heart. And that's extremely important for brands and all of you who advertise on local print, TV, and radio. The digital is getting more and more regionalized. You've all heard about it. And Daily Hunt has made that our core philosophy for growth. Just look at what happens if you're reading something in English and you come across a Chinese language creative, right? It'll just not register. You'll not read it, you'll not care, you'll not respond. What happens if that same creative is in the language of the content is you'll 100% register it, right? You may end up even responding to it. So what it says is that, and this is my sort of request to all advertisers, is when you're looking at the digital medium, don't just think of it as an English language medium. You have to customize your communication, you have to customize the language. Only then does it have a chance of registering with your user. And our own data shows that advertisers who use multiple language creatives, they get at least 4 times the response rate of an English language creative, right? So the data is there to prove that it increases brand awareness, increases conversations, and much higher response rate, right? So if you ever thought, why should I make an English language creative? Think about the image on your right, that if you're reading something and you get a Chinese language creative, unless there are those amongst you who you speak Chinese and can understand this, for the bulk of us, it's not possible. So the third concept that I want to talk to you, and the final concept, is as a content platform, right, how do we decide what content should we serve? And that's when we really go back to the structure of the human brain. There are 3 parts of a human brain. There's an instinctive part, there's an emotional part, and there's the analytical part. All of us have all these 3 parts of the brain. It's just that in some of us it's more and in some of us it's less. What I mean by that is, you may meet some people whom you may classify as emotional people, but it's not that they don't have the instinctive and the analytical brain. It's just that maybe the emotional brain is more stronger than the others, right? Similar would go for the analytical as well as the instinctive brain. Now, you understand all of this in concept, that's great, but how do you then personalize and how do you then scale? Because that's what, that defines how a product can really reach 1 billion Indians. That gets into the theory of artificial intelligence and machine learning. If I were to, and you hear these terms a lot nowadays, but if I had to just give you 2-line definition of this, machine learning is all about knowledge. You learn more and more about interactions, you learn more and more about how people consume content. It's the knowledge part of the equation. The second part of the equation is decision making, and that's where artificial intelligence comes into picture. So ML feeds into AI to take a decision on what to serve to the end user. That's a simple way to remember these 2 terminologies. So what we do then as a platform, if we want to appeal to a person, but then also scale it up, is that we keep learning about content consumption patterns on the app. Keep learning, what are people looking at? What are people consuming? Where are they spending time? This content appeals to what part of the brain? Is it instinctive? Is it emotion? Is it going to evoke a response, an emotional response? Or is it going to prompt that person to think, right? So once you start looking at this from a conceptual point of view, then all your tech and all your millions and billions of data signals and the processing and so on and so forth then start making a little more sense. This is my final slide for the day, but I wanted to tell you that we process over 2 million pieces of content every day on the platform, 2 million. And these have to be studied, these have to be categorized, these have to be analyzed and served to you so that you end up spending a lot of time on the app. Now, you may be a very emotional person, you may be a very analytical person, you may be a very instinctive person, and you are definitely a combination of all 3. It's just that the percentages vary. So how do I personalize this content delivery to you to make sure you spend a lot of time and then take that same learning and apply it to 1 billion people? So that's the point of personalization at scale. I'll not take any more time. I'm just about 30 seconds away. So I'll just leave you with these 3 concepts: hyperlocal, speaking in the language of the audience, a person, right? Everyone is special to us, one person, taking it to scale by using artificial intelligence and machine learning. That's how you develop a product that is both personalized and can appeal to 1 billion Indians. Thank you very much.